So obviously last weekend in Pittsburgh in the US there was a domestic terrorist attack, and this is something that we have to actually talk about, because especially right-wing terrorism is one of these things that it gets swept under the rug, especially by a lot by the mainstream media. They do acknowledge it, but they don't say what it really is. It's domestic terrorism. The guy that struck was an absolute domestic terrorist, and we've got to look at where this guy came from. He came from, you know, a website called Gab, which is an alt-right, sphere, a talking place where these guys gather. And what basically happened was, in these spaces like this, they indoctrinate one another without probably even realizing it. They just echo chamber, and they indoctrinated each other to a point where this guy saw, people who were Jewish as an enemy. And one of the things that you see none of these, classical liberals talk about, especially last year in the UK, was we had a terrorist attack on Muslims, and there were 4 other separate right-wing terrorists who were stopped from carrying out attacks. You then had MI5 come out and say, we are worried about right-wing groups who are organising essentially for a war. This is something we should be concerned about. We should be, trying to put a stop to, and trying to stop these guys. But for some reason the classical liberals and centrists aren't really interested in talking about these things or talking about them en masse. Now, I think it's important to recognise this is a problem. And I know there's going to be some, oh, but what about Muslim terrorism? No one's saying that isn't a problem, but you have a serious problem where generally it's being ignored, especially by the press in reporting this, because if the press do report it, then there is a chance that these attacks will get stopped, more information will get out, and that people will be aware, so that they will be able to recognise that these people are a potential threat. Now, if you look at who are the people who contribute the predominant amount of information to the security services, to police, that especially in stopping, Muslim extremism, it is the Muslim population of this country. So it always annoys me when there is a Muslim terrorist attack, and the onus is seen to put on the Muslim community. They do so much to try and stop people committing these attacks, but when we look at the right, that information system, that warning people, you've got to be careful of these guys, and you've got to look at what they're saying. Could this be leading to them plotting a terrorist attack? That information isn't out there, and we've got to be worried, because once again, we've got people like Tommy Robinson spouting continuous hatred, and he went on Sky News and basically said, I don't care if I incite hatred against Muslims. And I'm trying not to start this a rant about Stephen Yaxel-Lennon, because he's an absolute I think I've said more than enough about this guy on my channel, and to be honest, I don't want to say any more about it. I think I've said all I can about it, but we need to do more, and especially the government, I think, needs to do more and step up about potential right-wing terrorist attacks, because especially in the UK, we had 1 carried out and 4 stopped, as I said at the beginning of this video. That's worrying, but not a lot of people talk about that, and that is really worrying, especially especially in this country at the moment. I mean, remember, the guy who killed Joe Cox was a right-winger. He's a hardcore UKIP supporter. So yeah, we've got to be really worried about potential right-wing, and I think that especially the state that the world is in, and the whole way that politics is going in, we have to be careful more of these crazy right-wingers who are potential terrorists.